You ever met someone who just didn't like you? And you had no idea why? You were kind, you were real, you wanted peace. But somehow, your presence made them angry, jealous, or even cruel. That's not a coincidence, that's a spiritual battle. In today's video, we're going deep into something that most people never talk about, the spiritual battle of the chosen ones, and why they trigger the demons hiding inside narcissists. This is not just about people being mean. This is about how your light wakes up what others try to hide, their pain, their ego, their fear. And when they can't control you, they try to break you. But here's the twist. They never really win. We'll go frame by frame, showing how many times the Dark Lord tried to hit the Chosen One with lies, manipulation, betrayal, and more. You'll see how every attack was actually a sign of your power, not your weakness. So if you've ever been treated unfairly for just being yourself, this video's for you. You're not crazy, you're not weak, you're just chosen. And your light is loud. Let's build a space where real ones gather. Drop a comment, show some love, and join the community. We see you, we feel you, and we're rising together. Stick around till the end, because what's waiting for you is more than healing. It's your awakening. Let's begin. Some people can feel your energy before you ever speak a word. They notice something different about you, not in your clothes or your voice, but in your spirit. The moment you enter a room, something inside them shifts. They feel uncomfortable, nervous, or even annoyed. And you haven't even said anything yet. That's because you carry a kind of light they don't understand. This light isn't from your outer self. It comes from deep within your soul. It's the light of someone who has been through pain, healed through it, and now walks with quiet strength. Narcissists, on the other hand, carry heavy shadows within them. These shadows are full of fear, insecurity, and hidden pain they refuse to deal with. So when your light shines too close to them, it touches those dark places they've kept buried, and instead of facing their own demons, they blame you for making them feel exposed. That's when the spiritual battle begins. Before any words are spoken, you didn't ask for a fight. You were just being yourself, but your peaceful spirit was too loud for the noise living inside them. That's why they stared at you longer than normal, why they watched you when they thought you weren't looking. That was recognition, not of your face, but of your energy. Something in them knew that you weren't like the others. You wouldn't fall for their games, you wouldn't feed their ego, you wouldn't be controlled. And so they prepared their attack quietly. This is how it often starts for chosen ones. A silent war declared simply because your existence challenges someone else's darkness. Your light didn't hurt them, it revealed what they've been hiding. And when people live in darkness too long, light doesn't feel like love. It feels like pain. That's why they react with coldness, envy, or fake kindness, but don't let that change you. This recognition, though quiet, is the first proof that you carry something powerful. And that power? It's not for war, it's for awakening. They tested your boundaries with fake kindness, baiting you for reaction. It wasn't about control yet, it was about access. It didn't start with shouting, it didn't start with insults, it started with kindness that didn't feel fully real, a compliment that had a strange edge, a gift that came with silent strings, a friendly smile that watched you a little too closely. This was the first strike, but it didn't look like a strike at all. Narcissists don't always storm in with rage. Sometimes they study you first. They figure out what makes you soft, what makes you give, what makes you stay quiet. They're not trying to control you yet. First, they want to know if they even can, so they offer you attention, praise, or even comfort. But pay close attention. Their kindness always comes with small tests. They'll say something odd, then watch your face. They'll do something that crosses your boundary, then act like it was a joke. If you smile through it, they pass level 1. Why? Because it's not about loving you, it's about gaining access to your mind, your time, your energy, your soul. They want the door open just enough to step in. And if you're a chosen one, your heart is big, so you probably let them in hoping for peace. But the first strike had already landed, not on your body, not on your reputation, but on your spiritual field. They touched it. And now, the real war was starting. They tested your kindness, poked your empathy. That was their first weapon, guilt. They didn't raise their voice. They didn't slam doors. They didn't have to, because they found something more powerful, your heart. You cared. You wanted to help. It was the death of your old self. The version of you that tolerated too much, stayed too long, forgave without boundaries, kept shrinking to stay connected. That version of you didn't survive the betrayal. And thank God it didn't. Because in that moment of deepest pain, something higher was born. Your tears didn't just fall, they baptized you. Your heartbreak didn't just crush you, it cracked you open. And through that crack, the light finally got in. What was meant to destroy you actually delivered you. You didn't just survive betrayal, you transformed through it. You became wiser, sharper, spiritually alert, emotionally armored. You stopped romanticizing red flags and started recognizing them as spiritual stop signs. You no longer begged for breadcrumbs, you built your own table. You no longer looked for love that costs your peace, because now you know what peace feels like. And the narcissist, they watched in confusion, because betrayal was their ace, their final blow. They expected you to spiral, collapse, seek revenge, or go numb. But instead, you glowed. You rose from the ashes of what they did and walked into a new version of yourself, one they could no longer predict, manipulate, or reach. That's the power of the Chosen One's evolution. We don't come back the same. We come back divinely different. And that betrayal, it became your pivot point, the very thing that led you to your purpose. Because nothing clears your vision like seeing who someone truly is. Nothing activates your destiny like pain that refuses to be wasted. And nothing elevates you faster than being forced to walk alone, realizing you were never alone at all. Heaven didn't just allow the betrayal, it used it to remove what couldn't go with you, to reveal what was hidden, to awaken what was sleeping in you. So don't resent the betrayal. Honor it. It was the door, the last test before your next level, the earthquake before your breakthrough, the setup for your supernatural rise. And now, you've graduated from the war. And the narcissist? They didn't destroy you. They delivered you to your destiny. You stopped asking, "Why me?" and started declaring, "Now I see why me." You were the light they couldn't kill. There was a time when you sat in silence, staring into space, asking that question over and over. Why me? Why did they pick you to torment? Why did life keep throwing fire when all you gave was love? Why did betrayal, lies, and manipulation come knocking on your door again and again? But something changed. That question turned into a revelation, because now you're no longer whispering, "Why me?" You're standing tall, declaring, "Now I see why me," because you were never weak, you were light, and light doesn't get ignored in the dark, it gets attacked. You were the one who wouldn't bow, who wouldn't break, who carried something they couldn't name, but feared. That's why the war found you. Not because you were cursed, but because you were carrying a calling. You see it clearly now. You were chosen because of your heart, not despite it. You were targeted because of your energy, not your errors, your kindness, your empathy, your ability to see beauty in brokenness. Well, that's what made you a threat in a world addicted to power, control, and manipulation. And when you finally stopped apologizing for your light, that's when the transformation began. You stopped seeking permission to exist. You stopped shrinking to make others feel safe. You stopped second-guessing your intuition. You stopped explaining your boundaries. You started remembering who you are. And the narcissist, they couldn't comprehend it, because the entire goal of their attacks was to erase your reflection, to get you to question your worth, to rewrite your identity in their image. But their plan failed, because in trying to break you, they unknowingly revealed you. The more they tore at your identity, the more you peeled off layers that didn't belong. The more they tried to confuse you, the clearer your spirit became. You began hearing God in ways you didn't before. You began recognizing patterns, people, and places that dimmed your soul. You began walking with power, not pride, with grace, not guilt, with wisdom, not wounds. This wasn't just healing, this was homecoming, back to yourself. You no longer needed external validation. Your spirit became your compass. You knew when to stay silent and when to speak with fire. You became the version of yourself that your younger self prayed for, and your enemies never expected. That's the part they'll never understand. They didn't just fail to destroy you, they helped uncover you. In trying to bury your name, they dug up your purpose. In trying to silence you, they made your voice sharper. In trying to dim your light, they made it impossible to ignore. You reclaimed your identity not by fighting them, but by remembering you, by choosing to love yourself deeper than their lies. Spiritual setups, the false connections, the cycles designed to keep them small. And when you see it, you can't unsee it. That's the moment of awakening. And from there, everything shifts. You start dreaming again. You start hearing God in silence. You start aligning with peace instead of approval. You stop chasing and start attracting. You stop defending and start discerning. You stop begging and start becoming. And what they never expected was that the version of you that survived their attacks would come out stronger, wiser, and more powerful than the version they thought they destroyed. That's what it means to be a chosen one. We don't rise in spite of the attacks. We rise because of them. So let them talk, let them plot, let them watch, because the one they tried to bury is the one who's about to bloom. Your awakening is your return, not to who you were, but to who you were always meant to be. And now that you're aware, there's no going back, only up. Heaven doesn't let warriors fight alone. You began seeing signs, protection, prophetic dreams, anointing upgrades. You never asked for this war, but you answered the call. You stood alone, cried in silence, and kept walking when everything in you wanted to quit. And just when it felt like the darkness was closing in, something shifted. Not around you, but above you. What you didn't see before, you began to sense. What once felt like coincidence now felt like confirmation. You started seeing signs, numbers, names, patterns, words that showed up right when you needed them. You'd dream something, and days later, it happened. You'd feel peace in places you used to feel fear. Why? Because divine backup had arrived. Heaven never sends a chosen one into battle alone, but sometimes it waits. Waits until you realize that your strength doesn't come from the crowd, but from the covenant. And when you reach that point, when you stop looking for validation and start listening for divine instruction, that's when the reinforcements come. Angels don't always appear with wings. Sometimes they show up as strangers with perfect timing. A message that feels like it was written just for you. A door that opens without explanation. A danger that should have reached you, but somehow didn't. That's divine surveillance, spiritual intervention, and it's real. You started noticing you weren't being drained the way you used to. Attacks lost their sting. Places that once triggered you now hold no weight. People who tried to return with old tricks found themselves blocked, not by your ego, but by your elevation. You weren't just protected, you were being promoted, spiritually upgraded, your discernment sharpened, your prayers hit deeper, your inner compass, once shaken, now stands firm in divine truth. And the narcissist? They felt it too. They couldn't name it, but they sensed something changed. The energy shifted. You no longer responded like prey. You moved like someone who had seen behind the veil, someone who no longer fears the dark because they know who walks with them. That's divine backup, not loud, but undeniable. This is what happens when a chosen one survives the storm. God shows up publicly for those who remained faithful privately. You didn't need to clap back. Heaven clapped for you. You didn't need to prove your truth. Heaven began confirming it. And those spiritual gifts, they weren't random. They were rewards, evidence that your suffering wasn't wasted. You're not just surviving anymore. You're partnering with purpose. You're hearing. You're not just rising. You're remembering who you are. Because here's the secret the narcissist never wanted you to know. They were never fighting you. They were fighting the God inside you. And now that God has made it clear, you are covered. So walk boldly, pray deeply, trust fully. Because when divine backup appears, no weapon formed can prosper. And no demon disguised in charm can get close. You've entered a new season, and this time you're not alone. You're surrounded by the unseen army of the Most High. And that changes everything. In desperation, the narcissist launched the final blow, betrayal. But betrayal didn't break you. It birthed your evolution. They had nothing left in their arsenal but one last weapon, betrayal. The final strike. The one they believed would end you for good. And they launched it, not with fists or shouts, but with a knife to your back, disguised as love. This wasn't an accident. It was timed, calculated, delivered by someone you trusted, someone who had studied your soul just enough to know exactly where to hit. They smiled while they wounded you. They used your love as a weapon, your loyalty as a weakness. They thought if anything could finally break you, it would be this, the ultimate betrayal. But here's what they didn't see coming, that betrayal didn't bury you. It awakened you. It forced a death, yes, but not your downfall. They weren't done. You thought it was over. The smear campaigns faded, the noise died down, the narcissist seemed to retreat. But something still didn't feel right. You were no longer being attacked in public, but in private, in silence, in shadows. Something shifted. You began waking up at odd hours, anxious, drained, unsettled. Dreams became foggy, heavy, or intense. You sensed eyes on you when no one was there. This wasn't paranoia. This was the next stage, spiritual surveillance. Narcissists don't just fight with words. They fight with energy. And when they lose access to your life in the physical, they often attempt to invade through the spiritual. Especially when you're a chosen one, your soul is marked, your light noticeable in the spirit realm. They couldn't manipulate you in conversation anymore, so they tried to touch you in the dimension where your guard might be down. Your sleep, your aura, your subconscious. You'd feel sudden pressure in your chest at night. Wake up exhausted even after full rest. Sense waves of anxiety that didn't belong to you. That's not just stress, that's spiritual warfare. In ancient terms, it's called monitoring spirits. In modern words, it's psychic surveillance. They sent thoughts, obsessions, projections. You'd suddenly feel their presence. Memories triggered for no reason, emotions flaring out of nowhere. This was not coincidence. This was spiritual tracking, an effort to keep tabs on your light, your peace, your next move, because even from a distance, they could feel your elevation, and it threatened them. But here's the truth. Chosen ones are protected even in the realm of spirit. The attack may have shifted, but so did your authority. The more they tried to invade your peace from afar, the more your intuition sharpened. You started cleansing your space. You began praying with purpose. You became aware of your energy, guarding it not just physically but spiritually. You started speaking power over your dreams, rebuking intrusions, cutting cords, anointing your bed, and aligning your frequency with the Most High. What they didn't expect? That their nighttime attempts would only strengthen your daylight discernment, because spiritual surveillance works both ways. While they tried to monitor you, heaven was monitoring them, and every attempt, every projection, every whisper in the dark, it became evidence. Not against you, but against them. Because light doesn't just expose darkness, it reports it. You may feel tired now, but that's only because you're carrying more spiritual awareness than ever before. Your dreams aren't just dreams anymore. They're downloads. Your interruptions aren't just stress. They're alerts. Heaven is training you to not just survive this level, but to see through it. So no, you're not crazy. You're just sensitive to what others ignore. You're not broken. You're chosen. And this phase of the battle isn't about fear, it's about activation. You're being equipped to see beyond the veil, to recognize energy without explanation, to respond with prayer before proof. Because once you recognize that the battle moved beyond what eyes can see, you also remember that you're surrounded by angels no eye can detect. And in this phase, remember, they may be watching you in spirit, but heaven is watching over you. What they didn't expect, every hit only awakened you more. Your purpose got louder. Your vision got clearer. They wanted to break you, but what they didn't know, and what they couldn't know, is that every wound, every betrayal, every attempt to silence your soul only woke it up. Every hit, it didn't destroy you, it activated you. The pain didn't pull you under, it pulled you inward, into the place where your real power had been quietly waiting all along. You see, chosen ones don't awaken in comfort. We awaken in chaos. It's in the fire, the confusion, the rejection, the heartbreak, that our vision sharpens, that our ears begin to hear truth louder than lies, that we stop listening to the world and start tuning in to the whisper of the divine. And suddenly everything they did to harm you becomes the very reason you remember who you are. You begin to realize you weren't weak. You were just unaware of your power. But now you feel it. The rising in your chest, the clarity in your steps, the knowing that your pain had purpose, that you were never meant to stay quiet, dim, small. You were meant to lead, to shift atmospheres, to wake people up just by walking in alignment. And that's what scared them most, not your past, not your mistakes, but the unfolding of your purpose in real time. Your awakening didn't start with success. It started with sabotage. It started when everything went dark and you became your own light. Because when God chooses someone, the enemy tries to confuse them, but only for a time. There comes a moment when the veil lifts and the chosen one sees everything, the patterns, the fire, and waited for your reaction to prove their narrative. But you didn't give them the performance. You didn't scream. You didn't throw shade. You didn't feed the beast. Instead, you chose the most powerful weapon a chosen one carries: silence. Not the silence of fear, but the silence of clarity. A silence that speaks louder than chaos, because real power doesn't chase noise, it moves in stillness. Your silence wasn't surrender, it was strategy. A spiritual response designed not to protect your ego, but to protect your energy. You knew deep down that this wasn't just a personal attack, this was a spiritual war. And in spiritual battles, not every hit deserves a reaction. Sometimes, the greatest revenge is no revenge, just distance, healing, and elevation. You stopped explaining yourself.
You stopped proving your worth. You stopped giving access to people who only came to feed on your light. And in that retreat, something divine happened. You got stronger, your mind cleared, your spirit recharged. While they mistook your silence for weakness, heaven recognized it as wisdom. You didn't match their chaos because you outgrew it. Narcissists hate when the chosen one goes quiet because they can't twist silence. They can't argue with peace. They can't manipulate what they can't reach. And what they thought was their victory, your silence, became the space where God stepped in and began writing your comeback. So no, you didn't lose. You just paused the noise so heaven could amplify your purpose. They tried harder, lies, smear campaigns, fake tears, but nothing pierced your peace. That's when fear took over. They couldn't believe it. You didn't break. You didn't react the way they wanted. You didn't come running back, begging, explaining, crying, or falling into their trap again. That's when their rage truly peaked. Because for narcissists, control is their oxygen. And when you stop breathing their drama, they start to panic. At first, it was subtle, a rumor here, a twisted story there. They whispered lies to people who once supported you. They smeared your name with fake concern. I'm just worried about them, they haven't been the same. But the more peaceful you became, the louder they got. Because your silence wasn't just confusing, it was threatening. And that's when they hit harder. More lies, bigger drama, a smear campaign that tried to flip the whole story in their favor. Suddenly, you were the villain in their carefully scripted tale. They cried in public, played the victim, and hoped someone, anyone, would believe their performance. But nothing worked. Because here's what they didn't expect. Your peace wasn't just a mood, it was protection. The kind that comes when you stop trying to prove your truth and start letting God reveal it in His timing. That peace became your shield. Their lies hit, but didn't stick. Their fake tears fell, but didn't move hearts like they used to. Their story spread, but something felt off to the people listening. Why? Because when someone moves in divine alignment, even those watching from the outside can sense what's real and what's rehearsed. The narcissist tried to pull every card in their toxic deck, but with each failed attempt, something began to shift, not in you, but in them. What started as anger began to twist into fear, because they realized their power over you was gone. And when a narcissist loses control over a chosen one, they don't just feel anger, they feel exposed. They start to sense that the very darkness they used to survive is now being seen clearly without the mask. And that terrifies them. See, narcissists operate best in shadows, in secrets, in confusion, but your light brought exposure. Your calm called out their chaos. Your refusal to react showed everyone who was actually in control. And it wasn't them, and that's why they panicked. They thought their drama would drain you, but it didn't. They thought their betrayal would crush you, but it didn't. They thought their fake tears would sway people, but they didn't, because you, dear chosen one, outgrew the cycle. And when you do that, something powerful happens. They stop being a threat and start being a lesson. Your peace taught them more than your words ever could. Your stillness became a mirror, and what they saw, they couldn't handle. But here's the part they'll never understand. You weren't even trying to win. You just wanted peace, healing, freedom. You walked away not to punish them, but to protect your own soul. And that scared them more than anything, because for the first time they had no access, no control, no chaos to feed off. And in that moment, as their rage peaked and their mask cracked, something holy happened. Your silence thundered louder than their screams, and heaven smiled, because you finally realized you were never losing, you were evolving. The battle moved to the unseen realm, your dreams, your energy, night attacks, psychic warfare.
Wanted to understand, and they knew that, so they used it. At first, it looked like they were just having a hard time. They told you sad stories, they acted helpless, they dropped hints that they were hurt, and waited for you to rush in and fix it. And you did, because that's what kind people do. But slowly, you started to notice something. No matter how much you gave, it was never enough. No matter how many times you helped, they stayed stuck. And every time you tried to set a boundary, they made you feel like the bad one. That's how guilt became their favorite weapon. You said no, and they called you selfish. You needed space, and they called you cold. You expressed your feelings, and they turned it into your fault. They didn't need to physically fight you, they just planted tiny seeds of guilt until you started questioning yourself. That was the first real hit. Not to your body, but to your identity. Because emotional manipulation doesn't scream. It whispers. It hides behind love, but it's really control. It wears the mask of caring, but it's really taking. And for a chosen one like you, someone who feels deeply and sees the good in people, this hit cuts the deepest, because they didn't just twist your emotions, they tried to rewrite your soul. Next came confusion, twisting your words, rewriting memories, a spiritual smokescreen. This is where things got strange. You'd say one thing, and later they'd tell you that you said the opposite. You'd express how you felt, and they'd say, "You're overreacting, that never happened." You started questioning yourself. Did I say it that way? Maybe I misunderstood. Am I too sensitive? No, you weren't. What you were experiencing was a calculated storm of mind games, not loud, not obvious. Just enough to slowly shake your grip on reality. This tactic is called gaslighting, and it's a spiritual weapon. It doesn't just change how you see them, it begins to change how you see yourself. You begin to lose trust in your own memory, your instincts, your truth. They plant confusion like fog, and the fog keeps you from seeing the attack clearly. That's the spiritual smokescreen. While you're busy defending your intentions or trying to explain yourself, they're stealing your confidence one moment at a time. And the most dangerous part? They act calm while doing it. They speak softly, smile sweetly, and say things like, "I never said that. You must be stressed." You're imagining things again. But you weren't imagining it. You were being spiritually ambushed, not with fists, but with lies that bend your inner compass. This isn't about argument. This is about disconnection. From your truth, from your peace, from your power. For the chosen one, this is the enemy's tactic. If they can't control your voice, they'll try to silence your mind, but every fog eventually lifts, and when it does, the chosen one remembers who they are. It didn't happen all at once. It was slow, quiet, and almost invisible. One by one, people in your life started pulling away. Friends stopped checking in. Conversations with family felt colder, shorter, more awkward. You were left wondering, did I do something wrong? The truth? You didn't. What you were experiencing was the isolation tactic. Strike number 5 in this spiritual war. Narcissists, especially when threatened by a chosen one's light, know that their greatest weapon isn't always a direct attack, it's separation. They know that if they can cut you off from your support, your grounding, and your mirrors, you'll be easier to bend, to doubt, to break. So they plant little seeds, a lie here, a twisted story there, a whisper to someone who already had silent jealousy toward you. Suddenly people you trusted start to view you differently, not because of who you are, but because of what was said about you. And just like that, a wall is built. But here's what most don't realize. This isn't just emotional manipulation, and it's a spiritual divide. You weren't just being pushed away from people. You were being pulled into a sacred space alone, because God does something powerful in isolation. It's where distractions die. It's where false friendships fall away. It's where He begins to reveal truth. But before you saw that part, it just felt like abandonment, like betrayal, like loss, and it hurt deeply. Not just because you missed people, but because you couldn't explain why things changed. That's the thing about being spiritually chosen. Your battles don't always come with obvious enemies. Sometimes the people turning cold aren't bad people. They're just being spiritually redirected out of your path for the next chapter. And while the narcissist celebrated your silence, thinking they had succeeded, something else was happening. You were being separated for refinement. See, isolation is painful, but it's also prophetic. Think about it. Before elevation comes separation. Before Moses led, he was
alone in the wilderness. Before Joseph rose to power, he was thrown into a pit. Before Jesus stepped into purpose, he went into the desert. You were not being punished. You were being prepared. The narcissist may have intended harm, but heaven used it to shift your position. So while they smiled watching people turn against you, what they couldn't see was what was being built in your silence. Strength, clarity, spiritual sight. What they thought was your breaking point became your becoming point. This is the danger of trying to isolate a chosen one. You might succeed in emptying the room, but all that does is give God more space to speak. And when He does, that silence becomes a battlefield of revelation. That loneliness becomes holy ground. And the chosen one they tried to corner walks out different, stronger, wiser, unshakable. They didn't isolate you to destroy you. They did it. And heaven used it to distill you. Every time you started to rise, something random went wrong. But nothing about this war was random. It was coordinated. You started to feel hope again. A new idea sparked in your heart. A door cracked open. You felt like maybe, just maybe, the storm was clearing. But then just when things began to shift in your favor, it all went wrong. The opportunity fell through. Someone turned on you. A mistake popped up out of nowhere. You began to feel cursed, stuck in a cycle where the moment you rose even an inch, life slapped you back down. But let's be clear, this wasn't random. It was coordinated sabotage, birthed from jealousy, powered by spiritual warfare. This is what happens when a narcissist sees a chosen one rising. They don't just watch from the sidelines. No, their spirit can't stand your elevation, not because you've done anything wrong, but because your breakthrough reminds them of their own refusal to grow. And rather than change themselves, they'll try to block you. So they speak against your name in rooms you weren't even in. They plant doubt in people who once supported you. They wait until you're right at the edge of progress and then press the sabotage button from the shadows. But here's what they don't understand. You were built for battles like this. Every delay trained your patience. Every disappointment sharpened your discernment. Every sabotage gave you a spiritual download on who really walks with you and who never did. You started to see patterns, not coincidences. You stopped reacting and started remembering who you are. And while they were busy trying to trip you up, you were busy gaining wisdom they could never steal. That's the secret about the chosen ones. We don't just rise, we rise refined. And every fall, every setback, every scheme becomes part of the architecture of our next level. They weren't mad at your mistakes. They were enraged by your purity. It triggered the demon they thought was buried. It didn't make sense at first. You weren't perfect, but you were sincere. You weren't flashy, but your presence still caught attention. You weren't trying to prove anything. And that's exactly what made them feel exposed. See, narcissists aren't triggered by your flaws. They're triggered by your purity, your peace, your heart, your ability to be whole in a world that taught you to break. And when someone has spent their entire life hiding their darkness behind masks, lies, and ego, being in the presence of someone authentic feels like a threat. Your calm energy made their chaos louder. Your emotional honesty made their manipulation weaker. Your love for truth made their illusions crumble, and that's why they snapped. That's why they rolled their eyes when you spoke. That's why they mocked your light, calling it fake or too much. It had nothing to do with you doing anything wrong. It had everything to do with who you are without trying. This is what I call the trigger effect, when the presence of a chosen one activates the very demon someone spent years pretending didn't exist. And instead of facing that demon, they turned toward the light and tried to destroy you. Not because you hurt them, but because your existence reminded them of how far they've fallen from who they were meant to be. The jealousy wasn't about your blessings. It was about your alignment, your peace in chaos, your joy in storms, your softness that didn't break after all they threw at you. The chosen ones don't trigger people because they're loud, but because they're clear. And that clarity pierces what darkness tries to hide. But don't let their reaction change your reflection. Keep shining, because what triggers others is often proof that your light is working. You didn't fight back with rage. You pulled back with silence. That silence wasn't weakness. It was a spiritual strategy. They were expecting you to explode, to cry, to beg, to argue, to defend yourself in front of the audience they carefully gathered to witness your downfall. They set the stage, lit the